I think everybody or most people have a natural inclination to like to watch a train wreck. And what's happening in the economy right now, although terrible in a way, is also a little bit fascinating in a way. And I think everybody has kind of a tendency to just repeat how bad things are and read a lot of statistics about how bad things are. And I think I've pandered to that a little bit also, which I'd like to apologize for. What I feel is really important is to focus on what needs to be done. And I think it's great that so many people are becoming aware now of the economic collapse, and most people are talking about what needs to be done. Let me talk about a few of the biggest things which I feel are important. I think one of the first important things is to understand the fundamental structural problems that our economy faces. It's one thing to get caught up in statistics about how high unemployment is or how far the stock market has fallen. But if people understand the fundamental problems that we face, then they have a better way of predicting what to expect in the future. About a year and a half ago, I did a video called The Coming Economic Collapse, where I tried to go over some of these fundamental problems. But by far, the best resource I've seen on this in 7 or 8 years of tracking the issue is called The Crash Course by Chris Martenson, and I'll put a link to that series of videos in the description box of this video. That series of videos very clearly goes through almost every major structural problem that our economy faces, and it does so in a very logical, clear manner. It's probably the best way to get a full understanding of what we face, and it's also a great series of videos to forward on to other people if you have difficulty convincing other people that potentially the U.S. economy isn't going to continue on the way it's always done in the past. Another important thing, in my opinion, is after people understand what's potentially going to occur and that this isn't necessarily just a temporary downturn, is to focus on not the problem, but how to prepare for it most efficiently. And there are a lot of great resources, some great YouTube channels related to that, many online resources. One of my favorite YouTube channels is Dervaes, the urban homesteader, that discusses lots of ways to live more sustainably on a small amount of land in a suburban setting. The peak oil community online for 5 years or 10 years has been by far the leading community in discussing sustainability and preparing for potential strong economic downturns. So I'll put a couple of links to those sites as well in the description of this video. But just focusing on the solutions, I think, and all the different contingencies. Another important and overlooked thing, in my opinion, is focusing on the positive, or at least not becoming overwhelmed by the doom and gloom scenarios. The peak oil community went through this. Back in 2003, 2004, for several years, the peak oil community was completely dominated by doomers. And one person came along, Megan Quinn, almost single-handedly with a documentary and a few good videos, kind of changed the focus of the whole community away from all the negatives associated with peak oil to a lot of the positive opportunities that this presents. As bad as it may seem, a severe economic downturn or depression isn't nearly the worst thing you can face in life. I would personally rather have good health and live under any economic conditions. Most people in the world go under a severe economic downturn at least once in their lives, and they live under conditions that are probably far worse than anything the average American will ever face in the future. And there are a lot of positives that can come out of something like this. I'm certainly not saying it's going to be positive for everyone or for anywhere near the majority of people, but I do believe that some individuals and some communities are going to focus on providing value, on community, relationships, living the way that people used to live. And in many ways, I believe people were happier when they lived under balanced conditions rather than the somewhat unbalanced society we live under today. We're also going to return to an economic system, hopefully, which isn't so exploitive, one that isn't dominated by banks and dominated by debt-based currencies. We have a real potential to turn things around for our society, and it's something that's going to happen one way or the other. Better to be prepared for it, in my opinion, and to be part of the solution. And that brings me to the last and probably most overlooked issue that we're going to face in the future. I think that everyone's individual solutions career-wise or in their own personal life are going to vary a great deal. Everyone's going to provide value in a different way and live sustainably in a different way, and that'll be very unique. But I think that the collective economy that we form is the one thing that we'll all have in common in the future. And this is something that's pretty overlooked. Most people that have really studied this in depth have probably come to the conclusion that our current economy, based on over-leverage and debt-based currency, isn't really sustainable during a period of true economic decline. And the question is, are we going to be able to escape it? In a growing economy under a central banking system, it's fairly easy for banks to survive. They simply have to inflate the currency and skim part of that profit, and all that extra inflation is taken up by the growth of the economy. But when there's a strong, prolonged downturn, it creates an enormous problem, because banks have to either continue this inflation or all their loans start failing and they need enormous bailouts, or both. But the issue that we're really going to face in the future is banks can't survive under their current system. They are going to have to either continue severely inflating the currency, and there's not going to be any growth to take up that inflation, or they're going to have to continue to get bailouts. And they'll probably continue to severely inflate the currency as they do in most countries. Now, in most countries, when this potential hyperinflation occurs, the average honest people try to escape and form their own local economies based on barter systems or precious metals. They try to retain their value, but the banking industry can't have that. They need everyone in the country to use their currency so that they can siphon off value, basically. And they will fight to the end to stop individuals from escaping this coming inflation. Now, this is a battle that goes on in every country, and during the last American Depression, it's a battle that the American people lost. All of the gold was confiscated from the people of America and was given to the banking industry. It seems pretty outrageous today, but really no more outrageous than $800 billion being taken from the American people and given to the banking industry a few months ago. But just because the banking industry currently has a partial stranglehold on our economy and our government doesn't mean that that can't be changed. In the late 1800s, the robber barons and monopolistic trusts had just as great a stranglehold on the American economy and government, and grassroots organizations overcame that. It's really up to the focus of the American people. If we know what's going on and demand to be treated fairly, a very small number of elite bankers can't stand up to that. But if the American people remain distracted and overwhelmed by the collapsing economy and just upset by the hyperinflation and not really understanding what's going on, then it'll be very difficult for us to develop alternative fair economic systems based on barter or precious metals or anything else that isn't under a monopolistic control of the banking industry. And this isn't just a theoretical issue, it's an ongoing battle which is occurring today, just most people aren't aware of it. There were two companies that started for the first time in the 1990s to create an alternative currency. This one was based on gold, and businessmen could hold an account backed in gold rather than in any fiat currency. The government, at the behest of the banking industry, recently shut down both of those businesses, eGold and Gold Age. In the ruling against eGold, it was stated that a business can clearly engage in money transmitting using eGold without limiting its transactions to cash or currency, and would commit a crime if it did so. In other words, it's illegal not to use the currency which the banking industry has an exclusive right to create. You may have also heard of the Liberty Dollar recently, or the Ron Paul Liberty Dollar. That was the first privately minted silver currency in the United States, and they were shut down as well. So there are a lot of potential solutions to this issue, either individual creative solutions or grassroots political solutions. With the Liberty Dollar, for example, it happened during an election year and it was related to Ron Paul, so there was a big public outcry against the Liberty Dollar company being shut down, and the government never fully shut down that company. They've issued conflicting statements as to whether the Liberty Dollar silver currency is legal or not. So the most important thing, in my opinion, is just to recognize that as any severe recession or depression progresses, this is something that countries and societies always go through. If they have a central banking system, the central banking system becomes more and more desperate to retain control. And it's important to focus either on an individual solution to escape the coming high inflation, or collective solutions to allow us to form separate free economies which aren't subject to the siphoning off of value to the banking industry. So in addition to the opportunity to create a more sustainable society, a more balanced society, we also have the opportunity for the first time in almost 100 years to escape this monopolistic banking industry which has turned the average American into little more than a debt slave. We've got the opportunity for the first time in generations to regain our economic freedom.